Ski when it's time to ski, ride when it's time to ride, float when it's time to float, fly when...
I can remember talking about the road originally. I could remember one day when the road turned into pure ice. There were about 24, 25 accidents, people trying to get off the hill, and finally we stayed up here till almost midnight before we could, get the county to come up and help get everybody off the mountain. So that gives you some idea of the treacherous nature of the road back in the early days.
It was a task. It was a task. When we first came up here, they didn't have any cutbacks, and the road just came right straight up. And I remember Paul Hill, he'd go down and get the skiers and bring them up, And oh yeah, well, I always said driving Skyline or Pebble, you went up as fast as you could and down as slow as you could.
Well, there's always the drive up here has usually been pretty good. It's always been the drive down. There's been a few times when I've seen a lot of cars get crashed in the straights. And I've crashed a few cars on the way too.
I remember trying to drive down the hill lots of times when there'd be as many cars in the ditch as got to the bottom successfully because it was so icy.
Well, I used to come up a lot with my friend Tom. He had an old Chevrolet, and sometimes we'd ride up in Paul Hill's dump truck. It was an old Army truck that he had when he was building the place. And in fact, see, I was pretty young then. And my big job was to scout around and get a ride. I remember I'd start about Thursday or Friday calling people, seeing if I could ride up with them. And, I remember if you didn't have change, you'd spin out. There were some spots down there where automatic drive would kick in and start spinning. And,
the old curves were all still down there. They hadn't taken out a number of the curves, and it was gravel. It was gravel all the way up from about Bonneville Road. So it was quite an adventure. And there were times at the end of the day when it would get warm midday and the end of the day it'd get cold. It was like a toboggan run out of here. There were a lot of cars off the road.
My first time up here, the opening year, we had to walk from the first switchback to get here. And we walked straight up through Fred, Paul Hill, the Primses, a bunch of us, well, a bunch of them. I was 10 years old, and they went ahead and broke the trail. I was the last one to get here, and I didn't get here till noon. And Mrs. Hill come out and scooped me up, took me in. I was like froze to death, and fed me soup and sandwich. Then I went up the rope tow, and my first run down, I hit the lodge.
When we first started, the road had more switchbacks, and the road, of course, was narrower and not maintained as well. It could be very treacherous.
Yeah, I mean, the road was horrible, and it was either solid ice to where people couldn't get up, or bunch of mud, and you get stuck in the mud, and the road was a lot steeper then, and it was pretty tough.
Lots of switchbacks, and not anything like it is right now. More switchbacks, a lot more than what there are now. Where they teach the beginners right now is part of the old road system, and the lodge, we had a little octagonal shaped lodge. Francis and Georgia Ranstrom ran it, and they sold tickets out of there, and it's where you'd eat your lunch, and so that's been a few years ago.
Oh yeah. We'd usually, well, when I was a little kid, I didn't drive, so we had somebody drive, an uncle or an aunt or somebody we knew that would get up here. But I always came up either that way or by the bus. My mother would drop me off at the Greyhound bus depot. I'd have my ticket book, and we'd get on the bus, give the ticket to the bus driver, and half the time they never made it, or the bus broke down around the first turn. And then we'd all jump out and ride in the trunk of somebody's car, or the back seat of somebody's car. Yeah. Oh yeah, we weren't, you know, or hiked or walked or whatever. We weren't, you know, yeah.
Oh, not really, but some of the things that are interesting up here is we have an old pickup truck called Old Blue, and it's a '69 that's really become just an old friend that nobody wants to retire, so we keep working on it, and it just goes up and down the mountain, but it's actually sailed off this mountain, gone over the end of the parking lot with nobody in it, left the ground by about 20 or 30 feet, we figure. Everything from the inside the glove box came out, was underneath the truck, and the truck sat back upright on top of all this stuff, and so we still have it. We still use it.
Still running?
Oh yeah.
Still going for it?
Yeah. We have an old Army truck, an old deuce and a half. That when we were doing work on the Aspen lift, we figured out that the average age of the equipment we were using was about 50 years old. Our vehicle fleet.
It was tough. Yeah. You had to chain up typically down at the bottom. So you always had a little mud on the outfit.